So turning from physical parameters to the actual observations, what do we see when we look at the moon? Moon, when we look at it, we talked about this before, how it always keeps one side facing towards Earth. And so as we look at it, we see that it has dark splotches on it. You can see this with the naked eye. You go out and look at the moon, and you will see dark splotches on the surface of the moon. And so these dark splotches, when they had the very first telescopes, they realized the dark splotches were smoother than the other regions. And so they were called Maria. Maria is Latin for seas, because they look like dark, smooth seas. The brighter regions are called terrae, which it's just Latin for land. These are what we call the highlands. Seas are actually lower in elevation than the highlands. So what you have here is you've got the different sort of landforms here. Turns out the seas are not have anything to do with water at all. But that again, this was the original sort of thing they looked like. Sometimes you see craters in the moon, and the craters often have rays. The rays are these streamers of stuff coming out. That's ejecta, or debris being thrown out by the impact. Now, we would expect the back side of the moon to look just like the front side of the moon, except it doesn't. If we go to the front, look at the front side of the moon here, the side that's facing us, then we see the seas. If you look at the back side of the moon, there's very few seas right there. There's just basically one sea right here. There's also a large region down here that has sea-type material in it, but it's not exactly a sea. We see lots of craters on the far side of the moon. We see lots of highland structures. So the question is, well, why the difference? Well, what's going on here? So again, this is a question that we need to ask. Now, they didn't really understand what caused this difference, and they expected the far side of the moon to look pretty much like the near side. And as they flew by the very first spacecraft, remember that was a Lunar probe, so it was a Soviet spacecraft, flew by, and so that sea on the far side is called the Moscow Sea. And but why the difference? Okay, it's not simply because the far side of the moon's been hit by more meteorites, because the actual landform is different, and so so we want to figure out, why is there a difference between the near side and the far side? What could make the difference? Well, that means something had to influence the moon. Well, what could possibly do that? Well, maybe the moon's great big huge neighbor just 250,000 miles away. Earth did this. So somehow Earth has changed the dynamics of the moon, presumably. The seas actually only cover about 15% of the total surface of the moon. Again, the far side has very few. And so, why is this the case? Well, when we study the moon a little further, we find out there's no subduction zones, there are no places where plates are running into each other, there's no rifts, there's no plate tectonic features whatsoever on the moon. There are some mountains on the moon, but the mountains are not because of plates colliding and shoving material up. They appear to be impact features. For example, around the edges of some of these seas are big mountain ranges. Well, we think that what has happened is that the seas were caused by a big asteroid, slammed into the surface of the moon, gouged out stuff, and piled, up a big rim around the outside. That rim those rims are some mountain ranges right there. And lava would flow into the bottom of the sea here and make kind of a smooth plain. Okay, lava from where? Well, the lava would be from deeper inside the moon. And so the lava from deeper inside the moon is going to be more basalt type stuff, which we know is darker sort of lava. That's why the seas look dark. Okay, so that seems to explain some things. The other places you get mountains on the moon is in the middle of a crater where the ground rebounds. We talked about that in an earlier lesson as well. And so the mountains are impact features. Okay. The seas are impact features, a combination of impact and craters. We'll get back to that later because then the next question that immediately causes is, well, why don't we see them on the far side of the moon? Okay. We do see giant impacts on the far side of the moon. They just didn't get filled in with lava. So again, this is something that we want to investigate. Okay. Around the edge of the moon, as we see it from Earth, is Mare Orientale, Eastern Sea is what that means. And so it is right there on the edge of the moon, and sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. It is one that is a giant impact. The impact structure here, the impact structure is out this far. Only the and you can see mountain ranges out here around the edge of it. Only the central part of it got filled with the basalt. So this tells us something, that there's something different about the crust on the near side of the Earth and on the far, or rather, near side of the moon, the side that's near Earth, versus the far side. Mineralogically, the spacecraft we sent to the moon, for example, the Lunar Prospector, measured mineral content of the moon, and this is measuring iron content. And we find that the lava that made up, the basalts that make up the seas over here are in fact very rich in iron. And again, that thing in the southern part of the backside of the moon has a fair bit of iron in it too. Okay. And so that again gives us some interesting sort of things. That means that the Maria, the rocks that make up the Maria, probably are basalts that originated deeper inside the moon, like the upper mantle, and they worked their way up through an impact, something that cracked the crust and allowed that stuff to come through. Again, raises the question. Why did similar sized impacts, and there are similar sized impacts on the far side of the moon, why did they not crack the crust? The Japanese Selene high-resolution map of the moon actually gives us this very thorough map showing the moon. And again, we see that that on the near side of the moon, that we have a variety of features here on the near side of the moon. This gives us the seas. Most of these big impacts got filled in, but we see evidence of big impacts on the far side of the moon, and only that one got filled in. But the other thing is that in the southern part of the moon, there is this very large structure right here. Okay, that very large structure right there is indicative of a giant impact, much larger than any of the impacts on the front side of the moon, and yet it is not completely filled in. It's very deep. Okay, so this is elevation topography map right here. Notice it did not have the iron content or the basalt in that the prospector data showed, nor did it have the dark coloration that we see in the pictures of the near side of the moon on the seas. Now it is a little bit darker, but not complete. That giant impact we call the South Pole Aiken Basin, because it actually runs from near the South Pole all the way up to the crater Aiken on the far side of the moon. It is actually ginormous. It is up to 17 kilometers deep. Okay, so that's like 7 miles deep almost. And it's 2,500 kilometers in diameter. That means you could fit Texas inside of this thing. And so that's enormous. You have a crater, an impact structure that is big enough that you could fit all of Texas in. And so this is a huge impact. In fact, it's believed to be one of the largest impact features that we have seen so far in the solar system.